Cisco's. We had all our servers running FreeBSD Unix, so that was Radio Squid and Apache. Left the industry in about 2000, entered the PABX industry, leaving what I thought leaving IP behind me. Then all coming back with IP PABXs. I worked on the NEC tech support desk here in Melbourne for about 2 years, a while back. I've been a MikroTik user for the last 2 years, just starting to delve into that. So a quick PABX history. PBX has started in the late 1930s, after quite a few years after Alexander Bell invented the telephone in the 1870s. With the advent of LS, large-scale integrated circuits, it very quickly became an automated PABX, well before the adoption of TCP and IP. PABX architecture. Most PABX vendors are very proprietary protocol. They do this for a key reason, is to make everything uniform. So it doesn't matter whether you're using a digital handset or an IP terminal, to the end user, both handsets will react the same. So they use things like info packets, every time you press a keystroke on a keypad. Unlike your traditional standard RFC handset, which has a dial plan in it, you dial away, it gets all the digits together and sends it as one packet. Now the other thing with vendors, they do love to, it's just not the PABX vendors, it's also carriers which also love to modify their the packets, modify the way they like doing their RFC protocols. So example, Telstra and Optus got different implementations of it, even down to the call forward access codes. They love using different access codes. Issues that I've experienced on most PABXs, call block, call quality, toll fraud, and eavesdropping. MikroTik can help solve most of these, with the exception of some SIP password issues, which is completely external to the network, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Call blocking falls under two categories. One is a complete in and out block of a call, so that's where you get busy tone from the end user. The other is a voice block, so the call's been set up, the session's there, but you will get one-way or both-way audio block. Most common causes for this fault is the port forwards not configured, or incorrect usage of SIP ALG. Won't go into SIP ALG. SIP ALG is a big topic in itself. I think it's best done by David T.S. He's attended one of these MikroTik forums. Look his one up. Highly recommend it if you have any issues with SIP ALG. And PABX misconfiguration is another big one. So what can MikroTik do when you've got these issues? Predominantly in the setup, so when you've got inbound, outbound call block. Most VoIP issues, you can resolve this matter as well. So in the MikroTik, we've got the tools, the packet sniffer. In here, we just do the standard SIP trace. You can drag and drop it straight from your desktop. Now the voice carriers are usually very good. If you send them one of these SIP traces, they'll tell you very quickly where you're going wrong. Now, before I came across the MikroTiks, I would literally turn up to a customer site not having having a voice issue, and I would have to pull out my old hub or a managed switch, disconnect the customer's network, go around, tell all the clients, you've got to get off the phones, I've got to do a SIP trace, find out what the issues are. And then I would do the trace, I would grab this file, put it all back together, tell the customers they can all go on their merry way, and send this off. But with MikroTik, we can do both sides, both the WAN side and the LAN side, in the same capture. Most of the time, the carriers are only expecting to see what's happening on the external interface, because that's what they're more interested in. So in this particular fault, this is an outgoing call block. You'll see in there that the PABX programmer has put a private. So you can program your outgoing calls to be private or send your CLIP. I don't know why, but carriers do not like the anonymous, we set as private. It's a perfectly valid call state for a ISDN line, but they've got the credentials on every single call. So why they block it, I don't know, but there's quite a few that do block it. This is the same outgoing call, but this time you can see there the invites are correctly formed and we're presenting the main number. Call quality. As we all know, call quality is one of the biggest concerns at the moment with VoIP. Missing packets, you shouldn't really exceed 1%. Packets out of order, we can fix that with layer 7, but you've only got about 80 milliseconds to do that if they do come out of order. If they go too far out of after that 80 milliseconds, you may as well not send the packet to begin with. So what can we do? We can make sure the packets are leaving the router in time and on time. This is where the ISDN could do voice quality a lot better. So packet ingress, there's not too much we can do, but again, that's why I'm attending the MikroTik certification traffic control engineering next week that Mike's putting on. Toll fraud, this is a huge issue at the moment. There's been a lot of hacking, international call hacking. So the most common, or the old traditional hack was a hop-on, hop-off attack where someone would dial into a PABX and then use a voicemail, dial an access code and get out. The next most common form now with the VoIP is registering as an existing user account over the internet. Another form of hacking is hacking the database. I'm seeing this quite a lot lately. A lot of it can be put down to the vendor's way of doing their implementation. This is one that's been hacked. You can see there on the right the IP addresses, the same IP addresses registered multiple times to this system. Now this particular vendor, you can see there the authentication password for telephone port 09 is blank. They think it's acceptable because they send through a blank password that will then latch onto that extension and dial out. So from a PABX perspective, we've got to go through and make sure we knock out all the extension numbers on this particular vendor. So the other thing that PABX vendors do, this is two examples of two different vendors. This is for remote SIP extensions. One uses port 5070, I can't remember what the other one uses. As you can see from the information, it has to be a valid port number. Down here, it doesn't let you put in 0. So there's no way to disable remote extensions on a lot of PABXs. As you can imagine, we had a lot of arguments with a lot of them for quite a while saying we need to shut this down. Okay, from a database perspective, stopping attacks coming in, remotely accessing the terminal, and looking at the configuration of the customer's PABX, as simple know where your, this is database hacking, incoming. It's an incoming SIP request, sorry, not a database attack. So this is one way they can find out what database you do have. So in this particular example, we're blocking only inbound requests from our SIP carrier. We don't allow any SIP requests from anyone else. The reason for that, you'll see down the bottom there, it tells you this is a, even though it's not a successful attempt, it just tries to send through username and password, it comes back with an error saying, sorry, you can't get in. However, I know exactly what you are. You're an NEC SL2100 in this example. So it's a good idea to block down where your SIP requests are coming from. The database hack, once they use this method, they might know a hack for this particular vendor. So they get into the database and all of a sudden you see user ID and authentication password. Now that is literally what you see when you log into a telephone system database. There's not even HTML display options trying to hide the fact. One of these vendors has fixed this in the last 12 months, the other one hasn't. So once you've got access to the database, away you go on your international calls. To stop the database hack from happening, this is where we need to lock down your routers, or your telephone systems through the MikroTik router. So as network administrators, you'll often come to the case where your client's getting a new PABX and the PABX technician wants a remote access. Simply find out where they're going to come from and lock it down to them only, or a tunnel. And as the last presentation, PPTP is not the best, so I'm a bit behind the times with that one, but an example is set up some sort of VPN client for your PABX technicians and don't let anyone through. Eavesdropping, not really a consideration for most clients, maybe consideration for higher end clients. From a MikroTik perspective, IPsec tunnels would be a good idea between sites, and use non-internet based SIP trunks. So if the customer does want to go down the VoIP path to have whatever options VoIP may offer over other technologies, there are two breeds of VoIP trunks. So one is internet based and the other one is carrier network. So they've both got their advantages and disadvantages. Voice quality is always guaranteed on a carrier network. There's no contention. When you're doing your tests with your carrier grade network, so some examples are like Telstra, Tippet, Optus, Evolve, AAPT have all got them. You might be trying to ping to try to see if you've got connectivity, and your ICMP packets, sometimes you'll get about 20-30% packet loss. I've had this argument with them, but they say, don't worry, we don't guarantee ICMP packets. So just let you all know it's not a problem for voice quality if you are getting ICMP packets being lost. Secure, yes, it's more secure having a carrier grade thing, but you've still got things like remote access and then remote IP terminals which don't even go over that link. Cheaper, that's debatable, but usually because the carrier grade networks having to provide their own copper service or fibre service into the building, it comes out a little bit more expensive. Number portability, it is easier to have multiple number ranges from different states all terminating to the one phone system using internet based. My examples with my experience with AAPTs, you have to provide evidence, so that's old bills or current bills with multiple states, and only then will they provide those national numbers into the one service. Okay, so here's an example of how I've used MikroTik to connect to the carrier network, the carrier grade VoIP, not the internet VoIP services. So on here, I reserve port 1 because usually 9 times out of 10, as a PABX technician, we're not sort of allowed to connect to the network and provide the customer's internet service. So we're there purely to do the voice. So I'll leave that reserved in case they ever do decide to use us as an internet carrier as well. So any system I walk up to, I know exactly what's on these. We use port 2 just as a straight via the IAD to the copper network, and that's the private link. The phone system sits on ports 3, 4 and 5, which I set up as just a bridge LAN between those 3 ports. So The configuration, in that example, the voice server was 202.10.26.33. So I've got one static route via that AAPT link. Then I've got the default route on the top going back to the customer's internet router, which in my case, being a PABX technician, is usually a Cisco or some other device because we're not looking after their network. Very easy to put their internet into port 1 if you ever decide to in the future. Now, another problem you might come across, mobile users. With the mobile clients, often they will want to go from outside the network and carry the phone inside the network and still have that connectivity. So there's a few ways we can do this. DNS could resolve the issue with zones depending upon whether you're inside the network or outside the network to present either a public IP or a private IP. It's quite a complex configuration. Most PABX technicians wouldn't even get involved in that. You could create two SIP profiles on your mobile phone client. So one's got same credentials, but one's using an internal IP and one's using an external IP. But you will get errors popping up on your screen all the time when you're doing that. The best method is using the hairpin function on the MikroTik router. So yeah, this is just taken from the MikroTik manual pages. Must tell you, a while ago I had no idea what hairpinning was. I looked everywhere. It was a NAT loopback was another name for it, and it was only the MikroTik website which was able to explain it very clearly what it does. So I split the diagram up a little bit into the left-hand side and the right-hand side, whereas on the MikroTik it's straight under one another. So on the left I've got the packets leaving the handset going to the phone system, and on the other side the packets coming back the other way. So in this configuration, the phone system configuration in the handset is registering to 1.1.1. So it makes its way to the router. The router then does its NAT. It changes the source IP to 192.168.1.2, makes its way to the server, and everything's happy. Now, what happens if we move that mobile client into the network and we're still publishing the public IP address? So the same request is made, going to 1.1.1. It gets the MikroTik router and doing what it should do. It changes the source IP address to 192.168.1.2. But when it gets back, that does not match in the mobile client because it's expecting a packet with a source of 1.1.1.1 because that's where it came from. In this case, it's going to drop the packet, lose registration, all over. So when we enable NAT loopback, it tricks, on the way back, it tricks it to go via the router. So therefore the NAT will happen properly. And in this example here, you'll see the source and destination are completely reversed by the time from step 1 through to step 4. They end up getting reversed and everything's good again. Okay, so in order to do that, it's a simple one line on top of your usual NAT, your port forwarding rules, your DesNAT rules. So anything coming from within the network going to the voice server, we just do a simple masquerade. Okay, how not to lock yourself out of a router. I've had quite a few of my technicians swear black and blue that they put the username and password incorrectly, all to find that you log out and you cannot log back in. Oh, that's tip, not tip M. Okay, so in this one here, we open a new terminal, all good. So we've logged in with admin, no password. Under users, I'll change the username. Now, password it makes you put in twice, but username only makes you put in once. And I think that's where the guys are going wrong. So now if we just do a simple run the terminal, now it's trying to log in with admin and password, admin and no password. And it locks you out. just this one simple little tip, I think saved a lot of support calls with people having to default their router and restart the whole thing again. Another tip I have, use one of these little Brother QL 570 sticky labels. And the reason for that is when you're doing support and you're asking your customer to check to make sure things are running, it's very simple and easy to have a very graphical description. So you can ask the customers which ones are connected where, and if they're plugged in, we've got lights on them. So, summary. You really need to make sure you tell your clients if the voice will be supported on the networks. There are still a lot of ADSL2 customers out there. We get a lot of customers wanting to do VPNs between two systems using ADSL, and it does go pear-shaped. Lock down your systems in the way of the port forwarding rules, and the other thing is to also ask your customers to bar international calls and information calls at the carrier end. Because if they have got no need to make international calls, a lot of people aren't aware of this. Their lines are just open anyway. So if they've never made an international call in the last 3 years, tell them to ring the carrier and lock it down. The other thing is that you could always tell them just use your mobile phone for the director or whoever who may need to make international calls. That way they can't really blame you if you do start getting up an international bill, and I have seen them up around the $10,000 to $20,000 on customer sites. Give them enough bandwidth and they will hammer 30, 40 simultaneous calls. And most carriers have got toll fraud prevention algorithms, but that can take an hour or sometimes two before they realise that something is happening unusual to that client. So it's the old method of using the voicemail hop-on, hop-off attack is getting a lot less, because people realise if you've only got 10 lines, you can only do 5 hacks at a time. So that's 5 simultaneous calls to an international number. Whereas as soon as you go SIP trunks, it can be unlimited, the number of trunks, compared to using your traditional hacks. So yeah, sorry, that's all I've got for today. Yeah, thank you.